I'm so excited to introduce our guest speaker. When I reached out to Billie after meeting her in person in Canada to do a call with me, I didn't know what she was going to say. I didn't know like if she would have time for this. And then when she said she could, I just got so excited. You should have seen me. I was telling my husband, oh my goodness, Billie agreed to a call. So I feel very honored to have her here right now. I'm just going to introduce Billie. So, Billie, I met her at a birth conference in Canada. If you didn't see my story, I drove through the night, 12 and a half hours without a passport. And contrary to a random person on the internet who believes my story was made up and fake, it was true. I really did do that because I really wanted to be at that conference. And Billie was the keynote speaker there. She has over 40 years experience with birth. And I was so impressed with her presentation, how she talked about the body in ways that I had never heard explained before. I was like, I have to get her voice shared with more people. And I'm excited you guys have this opportunity. So Billie is going to take the floor, and kind of the theme of tonight is how to conquer fear when it comes to childbirth. I get messages all the time on this account of women who are just terrified of giving birth. One recently is a close friend of mine. She said, I'm so afraid that either I'm going to die while giving birth or my baby's going to die while giving birth. And there's real fears around childbirth that we've been programmed to learn in our society. But the truth is we can actually overcome those fears. So if there is a way to overcome fear in childbirth, do you guys want to hear about it? Because if you want to hear about it, let me know in the chat, and then Billie's going to get started, and it's going to be such an honor to hear from her. And then at the end, we're going to have Q&A. So Billie, go ahead and get started.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for this lovely, lovely welcome. And I can confirm that she did cross the border and she did make it to the conference in person. So whoever wants to say she's making it up, I guess I'm making it up too, because I saw her there. And welcome to my fellow members who live here in Canada. They'll get that. Okay, a traditional birth attendant is actually a very common term internationally. It means a community midwife who has been trained through community care apprenticeship and has not chosen the medical model of services. There are various names for this throughout the world. In India, it's called a dai. In Jamaica, it's called a nana. There are various words used to describe a traditional birth attendant. The WHO acknowledges that traditional birth attendants exist all throughout the world, and until recently provided almost exclusively in non-medicalized Western nations the bulk of prenatal birth and postpartum mentoring, education, and care. The WHO is, of course, an epic colonizer, and they have been on a mission to eradicate all traditional midwives and traditional midwifery and to replace it with the medical model. Not because the medical model is better, but because it's one of the features of colonization. Probably the most successful export from Western nations has been the medical model of birth. The medical model of birth is not a particularly safe one. It's not a particularly effective one, but it is the one that is marketed, and it has a monopoly in most places. I personally use the words, I made it up, I use the words traditional birth companion because I think it more precisely explains this role. I cannot use the word midwife. The word midwife here is owned by the College of Midwives. College is a regulatory body. It's not an educational body. It is a regulatory body, and unless I am registered with them, I cannot use the word. It is illegal for me. So I use the word traditional birth companion. And there are things legally I cannot do, which I wouldn't if you paid me. I cannot carry restricted medications. I do not carry oxygen to births. I wouldn't if I could. I cannot carry synthetic oxytocin to jab a mother in the ass after the birth. I wouldn't if I could. I do not induce. I wouldn't if I could. I must keep my fingers out of other women's vaginas because here legislation is written that once a woman becomes pregnant, the medical industry owns her vagina, and only one of their own can start poking and sticking their fingers and whatever they want up there. So I'm not told I'm not allowed to be up there, and I think good. I've got my own. If I want to play with a vagina, I know where one is. I'm not particularly interested. And it also means, thank God, that I cannot do the most heinous ritual, which is called a stretch and sweep. I am on a mission to convince women to keep their knees together and their knickers on so that nobody who has ever been in contact with me ever submits to that heinous ritual. So, how we give birth is physiologically no different than most mammals. Physiologically speaking, giving birth is a hormonal process with a physical outcome. And a normal physiological process is actually a finely tuned concert of hormones between the mother and the baby. The mother and the baby come together in exquisite harmony. And I say that birth is music. It is music. It is orchestration. It is symphony. It is melody and harmony. And it produces a baby. We are taught that to give birth unsupervised by the medical industry means that you're a bad girl. You're just so bad. Don't you think, little girl, stupid head, stupid poo poo dum dum, that you can have your baby without us? No, we will punish you. The infantilizing patriarchy, paternalism that comes out of this industry is gross, absolutely gross. It started about 350 years ago when, well, first of all, the witches got burned. The number one target of the witch burnings were midwives, nurses, healers. Once they were burned, obstetrics rose up to become our number one executioner. After the witch burnings, more women have died at the hands of obstetrics than pretty much anything else because it was never safe. They just did it. And it was the men moving into the women's field because women couldn't be trusted through the witch burnings to not be practicing sorcery. So when the men moved in, then they were sanctioned through the universities. They were allowed to attend, and they were allowed to attend universities. Hey, it's the dynamic doulas. Hello. They're my neighbors. I'm so glad to see you. Neighbors isn't about 150 kilometers away, 100 miles away. So the universities only allowed men in. The practice of medicine was sanctioned by the political church at the time. That had nothing to do with the faith-based church, by the political church. And women were not allowed to practice medical arts because that would be, if she did it, well, she was obviously more successful because the women were the herbalists and the healers, and they were more successful. So the fact that the women were more successful at healing than the men clearly meant she was practicing witchcraft, because no woman could be better at a man than something, and yet they were. The men moved into the birth world because the midwives had all been burned, and the doulas, which were called at the time the god siblings, those were the sisters, aunties, girlfriends, nanas. They went to all the births too, and they stopped attending because it became too dangerous. They were there without men, and without men, they might be practicing witchcraft. So who was there who was going to help the mother? She wasn't allowed to stay alone because she's too stupid and she might engage in sorcery. Lying in hospitals rose up because it was inconvenient for the men to go to the women's homes. Also, it was considered inappropriate and gross and sexually deviant. So they created the lying in hospitals. And in the lying in hospitals, the women went to there. And there was the midwifery unit for those who couldn't afford it. And there was the obstetrical unit for those that could. The death rate was shocking, shocking. Up to 1 in 4 women died. The women didn't want to go. And in some places throughout Europe, women who were in labor would head out into the back alleys to try to have their babies without going to the lying in hospitals. The police were tasked with finding them, picking them up and taking them into the lying in hospitals, where the likelihood is she would die. So this idea that birth is so dangerous came out of the industry. Once it moved throughout Europe and came here to North America, we have the father of obstetrics, our daddy. Our daddy is Joseph DeLee. And daddy knew that birth was really ridiculously safe. For the most part, she dropped her panties and the kid fell out. But daddy wanted to make money. So daddy told us he did say that the most effective way to build the industry was one, ban the midwives, because they brought our profession down. We were not elite if we let midwives come near us. So he banned the midwives. And then he said the best way to do this is to market birth as being highly dangerous and pathological. Then we'll make money. Oh, thank you, Daddy. That was so precious of you. So that was marketed in the early 1900s to convince women that birth was pathological. We were a ticking time bomb. We were about to blow up and kill our babies. And that helped to move women out of their homes and into the hospitals. Here in Canada, midwifery has always been illegal until 1993. You heard me, 1993. Midwifery was illegal. Women, if they felt like it, would call the family doctor, but for the most part, the family doctors didn't know much about having babies. So it was just the neighbor who came, the neighbor who'd had 4 or 5 babies. She came over. Now, this neighbor didn't know anything about shoulder dystocia or neonatal resuscitation, she didn't know about hemorrhage control. These neighborly births were, in terms of mortality, 4 times better than anything in a hospital. This is up to the 1970s, 80s. 10 times better in terms of health outcomes than the hospital. In fact, in the 1950s, public health went door to door in Toronto, trying to convince women to leave their homes and go to the hospital to have the baby, knowing at the time she was 4 times more likely to die at the hands of the hospital. Now, for those of us in Canada, when we talk about public health, doing something that is bad for us, I mean, who could imagine? Anyway, we don't have a very good relationship with public health here, but it's obviously not new. And then in the 1970s, early 80s, a bunch of wee stroppy cows had read Ina May Gaskin's Spiritual Midwifery. And we stroppy cows thought, well, hell, we can just be a midwife. We'll just go to births. What's the big deal? So we started going to births, and then we used the forbidden word, the M word. Not all of us, some did, some didn't. Well, the response was the medical association, because family doctors still went to births, they kind of liked it, it was fun for them. The medical association came along and said, these stroppy cows better get their fat asses back into the hospital. They cannot be unsupervised. So they then passed a regulation that no family doctor was allowed to go to a home birth anymore, or they would lose their hospital privileges. Now, of course, the kids today, I call them kids because I'm old, the kids today who are doctors, they don't know that the reason they weren't allowed to attend home births was because the medical association didn't want to lose their monopoly and didn't want women taking care of each other. Instead, they think that it's so ridiculously dangerous that that's why. Well, the truth is, at every place in the world, at every single point in history, when women left their homes and went into the hospital to have a baby, their death rate went up. So hospital birth has never proven to be safe, ever. It is not as safe as home birth. It never will be. And it's, in fact, I would not call it safe and effective. It is just a belief system. It is a belief system that has been very successful due to very clever marketing, very expensive lobbying, and convincing women that if they hadn't been there when all of those terrible things went wrong, that they would have died. Their baby would have died. I had my first baby there. My first baby almost died. My first baby ended up in the NICU, terribly damaged at the time, me with wicked PTSD. And of course, it was obstetrics that told me, well, you know, it's your body's fault. Perfectly healthy young woman. And that the next time we'll just have to do more interventions. And then it took me about a half an hour after I got out of that religion to discover, no, it's what you did to me. It was the outrageous induction and the consequences of that that nearly killed my baby. And they were there to save her. Well, it wouldn't have happened if I'd stayed out of it. But that's part of the belief system, that they do these things to us. And then once they save us, well, thank goodness we were there. But that's not what the science says. I did work with a young woman. She was a ridiculously brilliant young woman. She was working on her PhD on refuge. It was the Her PhD was actually on rape as a tool of war during a genocide. Heavy stuff. And she became pregnant and she began researching. And she went through the research on what is safe in birth, what is sensible, what procedures are backed by science, which ones are not. And she went through the research and she said, they don't match. I have been down as much research as I can find. And then I go visit my doctor or my midwife, and this is what they do. And she said, can you please point me to the research? Because I'm obviously missing it. I said, oh, there isn't any. You found the research. It's just that what they do is a belief system. And it's just predicated on beliefs, myths, superstitions, and essentially power and control. The underlying belief system of Western technocratic medical maternity services is that the greatest danger to the baby is the mother. It is her body that is the greatest danger to the baby. And that the greatest danger to the mother is the baby. And that they need to carefully, I mean, the first half of pregnancy, all that surveillance is primarily to terminate the baby. The nuchal fold translucency and the blood testing and the early ultrasounds, it's to find an abnormality and then offer to terminate the baby. That includes the 20-week ultrasound. Its primary purpose is to terminate the baby. After that, because, the baby is the danger to the mother. After that, from 20 weeks onward, all of the surveillance is on the mother to find out when her failing body is going to become a danger to the baby, and they need to swoop in and rescue the baby. This is a belief system. The mother and the baby are intricately tied to one another through blood, chemistry, spirituality, emotion. There is no separation between the two of them until after birth. They are a single unit, dependent on each other at the time. They are not each other's enemy, but that is the premise of these services, is to treat each other as if they are an imminent danger to one another, and then to swoop in. So when you start with a faulty premise, all science coming out of that is false. All of the procedures coming out of that are false because it is a faulty premise. And then he's not considered one of our daddies. Joseph DeLee is our father obstetrics, and Sims, what's his name? Oh, well, it'll come to me later. He is the father of gynecology. And he's the one who figured out how to do gynecological procedures by performing them on Black slaves without anesthesia. He was another good daddy. Look what daddy did for us. Now, because our two daddies are taken, we can't use that word anymore, but we do have Emmanuel Friedman, who's called the giant of obstetrics. Well, our good giant in the 1950s wanted to mansplain birth to us. So our good giant started with a study. And what he did is he took up fingering, first-time mothers, their average age was 20. 96% of these women were sedated with scopolamine, which was the earlier version of what we call roofied. 96% of these 20-year-olds were roofied. And here's our giant fingering them. But he was so clever. He put his findings on a chart and he then plotted them on a graph. And we now have Friedman's curve because he was so clever. And this giant also made up words for us to mansplain birth to us. He told us we have first stage, then we have second stage, and then we have third stage. He also told us about late and first stage and active labor and transition, and that we are guided by the clock. He's wrong. His entire premise is wrong. We actually don't give birth like that. That's not women's bodies. We don't do that. But once our giants fingered all of these, ever so ethically, fingered all of these roofied women, put it on a chart, the entire industry got turned on its head and said, the most important thing about having a baby is fingering a woman and looking at the clock and putting it on a chart. Well, they were wrong. That's not how we have a baby. But that's how it runs now. How many women, our entire pregnancy is run by the clock. Did you get to 40 weeks? Well, now you become a danger to your baby. Your placenta's dying. And now every day you stay pregnant, your baby's closer to dying because you can't keep your baby alive. Oh, and by the way, your baby's also getting bigger every single day because your baby keeps getting bigger from that dying placenta. that isn't delivering nutrients. Right. Okay. Whatever it is, we just got to induce. The premises are wrong. And you start building science on wrong premises, you're going to get junk science. So that's the clock on getting, ending a pregnancy. There's so much good research that is, worth pursuing. And then once you do start your contractions, then you're on the clock. You're only allowed so long. Time is money, people. Time is money. But it's billed as though, you're about to kill your baby because you're still in labor. Well, that's not true either. Do some babies pass away? They do. Yeah, they do. 55% of the babies who pass away are due to two reasons: premature labor, premature birth, or congenital abnormalities. And the rest of them are mostly unknown. Do some babies pass away? Yes. But if you look at the track record of obstetrics, they have not reduced preterm labor in about 30, 40 years, in spite of what, how many visits you're going to and how many injections you get. They have not reduced. The interventions have skyrocketed to unconscionable levels. 1/3 to 1/2 of women being cut open and left with a scar on her uterus. Well, it better be producing good results. It's not. There are no more babies being saved. Nothing. There are no improvements. No more babies being saved, but actually maternal mortality is rising. There are more mothers dying from this nonsense. So how do we get rid of birth fright? Same way you get rid of COVID fright, you turn off the TV. you stop tapping into this nonsense. Do you need an obstetrician? It's a service. Do you need your ducts cleaned? Probably at some point, but do you have to? Is there a law? No, it's just a service. Use it if you like it. And if it's a crap service, don't use it. You choose your mechanic based on the fact that you trust them. If you find one who rips you off and does a crappy job, you don't go back. So the industry itself, its results are so terrible, it should be shut down. The number of women, anywhere from 30% to 90%, depending on where you are, end up with a scar on their uterus. Between 1 in 8 to 1 in 2 women end up with PTSD. That's a brain injury. Here, 1 in 10 women spend the first year of motherhood thinking of hurting themselves from the trauma. We aren't saving any more babies. The rates of PTSD, depression, anxiety are through the roof. Secondary infertility from this, more mothers are dying. And in fact, the neonatal death rate is rising too. So here, the provinces are responsible for healthcare, and they're the ones who decide if they're going to keep records on who dies and why. Well, apparently they don't. Maternal mortality, they don't. Some do, but not really, because apparently when a woman dies during her maternity experience, it's just not that interesting. They don't. Then we have our Canada's version of ACOG, and they were asked, why are more mothers dying? And the Canadian version of ACOG, without any data whatsoever, said, well, the women are fatter and they're older. Oh, and we've got refugees. Oh, thanks. They don't know. And I don't think they care. So my premise is, why the hell are we using these horrible services? We can do better ourselves. If my grandmother had babies back in the, around World War I, and the neighbor came over, and my grandmother, her first children were fraternal twins on the prairies with no running water, no electricity, no money for a family doctor. So a neighbor would have come over, and she had 2 babies who lived into their old age because it was what we did. We just had a baby and we called the neighbor. Those outcomes were very good. Now, there are things that have changed that have made things better than it was back when my grandmother was having babies. And almost every single improvement in maternal and infant mortality has to do with infrastructure. In other words, is our water cleaned up? Do we have access to water that's cleaned up? Is there less air pollution than there used to be? Maternal smoking went down. When that reduced, stillbirth went down fairly dramatically. Is there food security? Can we eat? What kind of food are we eating? That keeps babies alive, keeps mothers alive. Every improvement has always been due to infrastructure. It has never been due to obstetrics, although they do take credit for it. Now, is obstetrics useful? From time to time. From time to time. Yeah, why not? If you need a brake job, go to your mechanic if you don't know how to do it. Yeah, they're useful from time to time. I'm not saying get rid of it, although the industry is imploding. It's the law of diminishing returns. It is collapsing. They don't seem to notice, but it is. And the fact that it's collapsing, I think we have to, as women, figure out how to do this. We're strong, we're smart, just do it ourselves. I think that is the most sensible approach, is that we really can do it ourselves. And if we need help, we know where it is. We can get help if we need it, but we also know how, with a little bit of smarts, to do things wisely, so the likelihood of needing help is pretty minuscule. Okay, I would love some Q&A now.
Awesome, Billy. I just want to touch back on something that you said because I think this is the key to the whole picture about it's a belief system. Because as especially like in my circle of people, like growing up, it's just what you do. You find out you're pregnant, you go to the OB. And that's just what you do. And to go outside of that, you're really stepping into territory that if you don't have a community supporting you, you're really going to be looked at weird. Like, what are you, you're doing something dangerous. And I'll never forget it was like my third appointment. I was a first time mom. I was 12 weeks pregnant. And I Googled OBs in my area, right? Like, that's what everyone does. Went to the OB. And with the little knowledge at that time I did have, I knew I was not going to get the flu vaccine, pregnant or not pregnant. I wasn't going to get it. And my OB at 12 weeks pregnant tried to pressure me to get the flu vaccine. And whenever I told her I'm not interested in that, she told me my baby and myself are at risk of death. And do you really want to put your baby at risk of death? And I'll never forget that because I walked out of there and I looked at my husband. I said, I'm never going back in there. Like, that lady doesn't know what she's talking about. And that's whenever I went down this path of finding natural ways to have babies. And we found a wonderful midwife. And I've had I've had an OB deliver two of my babies, and they called her the midwife of OBs because in Oklahoma, the midwives weren't allowed in the hospitals. Thankfully, they're bringing them back. But it's just like you said, it is this belief system that you are safer to go to an OB. And I'm sure there's people that have stories on here, yes, like there is a place for their expertise. There are situations where a C-section may be necessary. But going back to retraining your brain, and I think that's what we're going to get a lot of Q&A on, it's probably going to come down to like the how, because you're really like I remember my aunt, my mom's best friend, like she would text me and call me and say, I cannot believe you don't have an OB. Like, you're putting your family at risk. Like, this is daily stuff you're dealing with. And it's incredible though, when you step into informing yourself, you realize, whoa, I can actually do some incredible things. And my OB didn't tell me any of that. Not one thing. I'm sure if you talk to people who do have OBs, the OBs never tell them anything about birth. Not one thing to prepare them. So, all right, I'll get off my tangent. But for Q&A, guys, if you can just raise your hand through the Zoom chat. So if there's a little icon and you can click raise hand. It's a smaller room, so if that doesn't work for you, you can just unmute and ask your question. But I just wanted to try to keep it as orderly as possible because I know we can get pretty fired up on this topic. But now is your opportunity to ask questions. Billie has some incredible experiences just at the conference when I heard women talking about what she did at their birth. I think you were there for 7 days with the woman. Like, what OB is with someone for 7 days? Like, Billie has seen birth so much and it's so powerful, her insight. So take advantage of this. Take advantage of her insight. So let's see, who wants to kick off the first question?
Well, I will respond to something you said.
Oh,
you
yes,
said,
absolutely.
when the OB said without the flu shot, you and your baby would both die. And you said she didn't know what she was talking about. I'm going to tell you, yes, she did. That is coercive language. Absolutely. They are trained in coercive language. And the most common approach to coercive language is the dead baby threat. I would talk to a researcher in Australia, and she said she'd heard some women mention the dead baby threat, but she didn't use it and she'd never heard it. And then she started doing her research and she said, oh my gosh, it is the number one threat worldwide. It is a universal threat. The old dead baby one, dead baby, dead baby, dead baby. And I will have a consult with someone in, whatever week they're at. Maybe if they make it up to week 30. And I said, oh, you have the dead baby threat? And if they said no, it's like, oh my goodness, you got yourself a winner there. That is amazing. But this is the tactics of a cult. A cult will use threats. Do not leave me, because you will have to face the wrath of whatever, deity that this cult is deciding they follow. And so to say, if you break with the cult, you'll have a dead baby. That is classic, right out of cult programming. Plus, if you leave, if you don't do this, if you don't do that, you'll be dead. The baby will be dead. And if you think you're going to leave, this cult, we will come after you with child services. Straight out of the playbook. And in fact, now that the dead baby threat is getting less effective because women laugh at it, here, it's the threat of child services. And I was like, oh, for crying out loud, who's just their barking lapdog? It's so juvenile. I say the industry has the collective maturity of a hungry toddler. Me do it, my do it. No, dead baby. No, it drives me nuts. That's not to say individuals in the industry are not stellar people. There are very stellar people in the industry. I'm talking about collectively, the industry.
Yeah, the industry. Yeah, that's a really good point to make. Yeah, it's crazy. Okay, let's see. Hannah, she says, I want to be a midwife, but California definitely has tons of limitations for licensed midwives. I am inspired by your courage to not have fear to work outside of the realm, but still stick to your heart. Sorry, it's really far away. Your heart's work serving mothers and their babies and doing it well. How do you do it? By the way, I love the perspective you've given. That's so cool.
How do I do it? Because somebody has to. Somebody's got to do this. Somebody has to stand up to this nonsense. Somebody has to tell women there is an option. Somebody has to say, your grandmothers and your great grandmothers didn't put up with this bullshit. It didn't even exist. And I think somebody just has, and it's easier for me as a grandmother because I'm not in that vulnerable place that somebody's going to come after my children. So it is easier for me as a grandmother. And also, I have no fucks to give. I am so over this. I am so over it. The damage that's worldwide. I've done so much research, and really enough's enough. I'm not going to pander to a tantruming toddler because they're not getting their way.
Yeah. That's
so yeah, you have to operate. There are other ways of operating. Becoming licensed means you are now beholden to the state. That means you can only do what the state allows you to do. So it's finding ways. I will never, ever become a regulated midwife here. I will never get a license. I will never be forced to hurt a woman and a baby. I will never be forced to medically rape them. I will never do that. So I will never, ever operate under their realm. And I just do my thing. I know it upsets them terribly. I hear that they hold like monthly meetings trying to figure out what to do with the Billie problem.
I think an aha moment I had in Canada was these around is again, fear is like the number one thing. Like, how do you overcome fear? An aha moment I had, and I think it was you, I think you were the speaker when I had this. Whenever you look at the ingredients to have birth and how our society has changed so much that they've skewed that, like, whenever a mom like feels her first contraction, we're told, oh, hurry, go do the steps, go get, go tire yourself out, get that baby. And you just so eloquently described how your body knows how to get its like you didn't have to tell your baby at whatever week to, okay, we're going to start developing the lungs. Okay. That's what we're going to do today. All right, everyone, let's do the lungs. No, like your body knows, like God created you to have babies and he created you to give birth. And so your body knows what to do. And you laid out the picture of how the hormones, like you said, the orchestra work together and how we have interrupted that so much. And that's when I had my aha moment of how home birth is safer than hospital birth, because when you are in an environment that you feel safe, supported, and loved, that's when your body can optimally produce the hormones it needs to bring the baby out. But whenever you are in an environment that you have to fight against, then you're going to have adrenaline and your body's going to be restricting and it's not working for you. And that's whenever, oh, okay, well, let's just give her Pitocin. And then, from there, obviously things go really south. I mean, I was talking with 3 women in my community, didn't know them and just met them, first time moms. I am not exaggerating. 2 of the 3 had C-sections because they were all 3 induced. 2 turned into C-sections. Totally normal pregnancies, no high risk. First time moms. One had a ruptured bladder from the C-section, and she's terrified to get pregnant again. And she had envisioned having this big family. She has 1 kid now because she's at risk of having to wear a bladder bag the rest of her life. She's in her early 20s. And so this is why we're talking about this, because those things don't have to happen. And your body was created to give birth. And the more knowledge that moms have on how their body is supposed to work, the better outcomes we're going to have. So if you want to touch any more, you said it so perfectly of how the hormones communicate to each other and why you advise women when they feel like they're going into labor, your first thing you tell them is to rest, which I had never heard that before. Usually it's, hurry, let's get the baby, let's do more squats.
Yeah, well, that comes from our giant, Emmanuel Friedman, who mansplained birth to us. And he put us all on a clock that, if you finger roofied women, you can plot it on a graph, and he got it wrong. And that comes from his ridiculous work. That, once it starts, it goes on that graph. And if it doesn't go on that graph, well, then there's something wrong. And God forbid we aren't on the graph, because then what's going to happen? Well, then we're going to have to be in the hospital. They're going to have to give us synthetic oxytocin, and you might be a failure to progress, and you might end up with a C-section. Well, how about you just go to bed? I mean, hell, you're going to have a kid anyway. Why be tired? Go to bed.
The baby's going to come.
Yeah, what's the rush? Chill. Some babies come like a locomotive, and others are leisurely. Both are fine.
Yeah, that's so cool. All right, guys, your opportunity for questions. You feel free to unmute. Oh, someone said, sorry, I missed yours. Okay, what are your thoughts on ultrasound? This is a big that is difficult for first-time mom to me to let go of. You're not going to do any surveillance. What if something is wrong that could be addressed? That's a great question.
Ultrasound is a war technology. It was developed in World War II to detect underground submarines. This is a military-grade technology aimed at your baby. Prior to this, doctors were using X-ray because they felt it was unethical to not do an X-ray to see the size of the baby and the size of the mother's pelvis prior to labor, which is stupid because the hormones of labor actually open the pelvis by 1 to 2 centimeters, and the baby's head molds. It was stupid. But they were convinced that they were right. And once they found out that their X-rays were actually causing cancer in the babies, they didn't give it up because they felt them looking was more important than the long-term outcome of the baby. You see, that's not their problem. You're out of their services in 6 weeks. If that kid's out and alive for the first 6 weeks, well, actually, they go to the pediatrician as soon as they're born. If that kid comes out of your body alive, their job is done. After that, it's the pediatrician's problem. So they were doing X-rays because that's part of their job. How do they get the kid out of your body, even though it caused problems? So they didn't give it up. Well, then World War II, ultrasound technology, military-grade surveillance comes along. They're like, babies live in water. We can look at them, and applied military-grade technology to these developing fetuses. And if you consider, it is part of our culture of surveillance. We are all being heavily, heavily surveilled. And it starts prior to birth. The surveillance of the fetus to make sure this fetus is going to be a good little citizen, part of the industrial complex. So this military-grade surveillance, is it safe? No. It comes with many risks. One of them is pregnancy loss. It has many, many risks. So pointing this at your baby comes with consequences. Now, humans are ridiculously resilient. I've heard we're the cockroaches of the universe, and we seem to be able to survive all kinds of things. So we're incredibly resilient, and probably everybody on this call, except for me, was ultrasounded in their pregnancy. That's just how it is, and you're all here. So humans are resilient, but it is a risky technology. Almost all the purpose of early surveillance isn't to find out if there's something wrong they can address, because the answer is termination. After that, the answer is to induce and do C-sections. So routine ultrasound surveillance has not improved the outcomes for the mother or the baby, although you will hear that one time after 17,800,000 ultrasounds, they found this one thing they did in utero surgery for the baby. Was it the right thing? I don't know. Depends on your ethics. But so far, the outcomes are a heck of a lot of C-sections and inductions. No changes in outcomes other than there are long-term consequences, but they're not really studying them because they decided it was safe and effective and it is the right thing to do for surveillance. However, that said, it is the best technology we've got for determining what a problem is. If you've got blood pouring down your legs, please go to a hospital and say yes to the ultrasound so they can find out what's going on. It is the best technology we've got for diagnosing when there's a problem. But if you're looking for something that doesn't exist, then it's not a good technology. Okay, just to add to your repertoire of knowledge here, a study that was published in the Journal of Scandinavia. The study was a major anomaly detected or not? Major being the baby's stomach is on the outside or something, or missing a kidney. Of the pregnancies where the major anomaly was detected, compared to a pregnancy where it was not detected, either because the mother declined an ultrasound or the ultrasound didn't pick it up, which is common. So of the two, if it was detected, all babies were born prematurely, all babies were born by C-section, all babies got surgery within, I believe, 4 hours. If it was not detected, the babies were born at term. Many fewer of them had C-sections. They got surgery within, I believe, 12 to 17 hours. The ones that were not detected, more of them lived because they weren't preterm and because more of them had vaginal births. So their surgery came later, but more of them lived. So as it turned out, it wasn't a benefit.
Wow. What was that study again?
It's in the Scandinavian Journal of Obstetrics.
Oh yeah, that one. Okay, yeah, that was. I'm gonna note that down. I love your perspective, Billy, because I think it is really important, and especially for moms who this is like a new world, like to step out of the norm. Um, at the end of the day, you have to do what you believe is best for you and your baby. And that's going to be a little different for everyone. But it starts with being informed and having knowledge, because if you don't have the knowledge, you can't make those informed decisions. And so I love your perspective of, if you have blood going down your leg, don't go into the wilderness and like go to there is a time for that. And, and I think that's, our natural space, we get accused of that way too much, that we're uh foolish and all this stuff, and it's like, okay, let's take a step back. I think we could accuse you of that. Okay, you said there was a couple.
I'm not anti-medicine. It's like, use it appropriately.
Right.
But for the most part, when it comes to maternity services, it is used 100% inappropriately.
I mean, just ask your friends. Like, it is crazy to me the amount of interventions they're putting on totally normal, healthy women, young women, pregnancies. Just ask your friends and you will see how crazy those statistics are.
Go back to Hannah. Do I think midwifery school is worth it? I've not become certified as a doula for this very reason. All education is worth it. It's what you do with the education.
Mm.
So I think if that is the education you want and it's going to teach you something that you will find useful, do it. But it's up to you what you choose to do with it. So, I mean, I can't call it midwifery education, but that's exactly what it is, to train traditional birth companions, because I can't use the M word. I hope they find it useful education, but it does equip them to be like the neighbor who knows a hell of a lot about a hell of a lot. Erin, you were in CBI when I was there. Well, how lovely. She's certified as a birth doula when I was still part of CBI, and I'd love to hear if now's a good time to talk about why I left that organization. Thank you for your beautiful work and perspective as a woman serving women. Thank you very much, Erin. Yes, I had a fantastic experience as the director of education in Childbirth International. It was an extraordinary experience. I was writing accredited continuing education. I worked very closely in that company to help them become accredited with distinction with the American Nurses Credentialing Center. It was a wonderful experience. And what I was doing was I was helping to fulfill that founder's vision and purpose. And it got to the point where I only have so many years left on this planet, and I have a vision and I have a purpose. And so while it was an absolutely incredible experience, it was time for me to pursue what it is I need to do. And I need to help women see we've got another option. Doulas integrate into the medicalized birth services industry. That is not my vision. My vision is to get more of us out of it. And so that more babies will arrive. You see, I love system science. System science is basically the science of everything. And when you understand system science, you pretty much understand everything. Every system has an end goal, a reason for existing. The medicalized birth services industry, once you understand their reason for existing, everything about them makes sense. Their reason for existing began 350 years ago. Their reason for existing is not to save women. It is to control and co-opt women's physiology for power and profit. Once you know that, you understand everything about that industry makes sense. There isn't a damn thing broken about it. And there's nothing that needs changing. They are excellent at what it is they were designed to do. My system is to help more babies arrive safely and gently from healthy, empowered, non-traumatized women. That's my system. That's my goal. That's why I exist. So CBI is working on doulas to improve things their way, and it's not my vision anymore. Loved working there, but not anymore. So I have things to do.
That's awesome. Speaking of that, and I want to give people opportunities. So if you want to unmute, you're welcome to do that. I know a lot of us are busy moms, so typing might be easier. So feel free to put your questions in the chat, but this is your opportunity to unmute. And I did want to do a quick giveaway real quick, because I said I would do that. So what I'm going to do is just drop in the chat. You can drop, I guess, where you're from, like, because a lot of people joined after we initially did that. So drop in the chat where you're from, and I will choose a random person from the chat. So go ahead and throw those in there and give me just a second to scroll, and then I will randomly stop on someone. I am not looking. I promise this is fair.
There's another neighbor from Stony Creek. Hey, I'm in Kitchener. We're neighbors.
Oh, that's awesome. Stony Creek, Canada. That's a cool place. Okay, I landed on
Aaron.
Aaron, I landed on you. So you used to be my neighbor in Fort Worth, Texas. So Aaron, I think we're friends on Instagram. If you can find me on Instagram, just DM us your address and we will ship this out to you. Okay, so opportunity for questions. Feel free to unmute or put in the chat. And if not, I want to give this an opportunity for Billie to share about what she is doing. The Hive community, I believe, is what it's called. And I think it's really important for you guys to understand like what she's doing. And before you talk, Billie, I wanted to read what you had on your site, because I thought it was just so, if this doesn't speak perfectly to your mission, and I think a lot of you, because there's a lot of people in here who are in the birth space, and our job is to educate women so that they can make those informed decisions. And I love what you said, and I had it pulled up. I wanted to repeat it. Okay. So give me just a moment to read this if you don't mind. Is anyone having a good birth anymore? All we hear are horror stories because women's birth are fairly horrible, but it doesn't have to be that way. We can make changes and do things differently. So we're a community of intelligent, invested, grown-up women who can make things better for ourselves and our children and their children. We have to start somewhere. Let's get started. So I think it's amazing what you have put together. And so feel free to share about it and see if maybe someone in here it's something that they would benefit from.
I started the Harrigan Hive as a free network because I love teaching and I love sharing things and I love connecting people. And I've done that for a few years. And we have, I believe, about 1,300 people there. But the thing is, when you get, and the reason I also wanted it open and free is because I wanted the lurkers from the College of Midwives to join. I wanted them to hear what women were saying. I wanted them to hear that women are coming out of these services broken human beings, shells of who they used to be, traumatized, brutalized. And I wanted them to hear that the women who come into my community say they suck. But as it is, when it's a big community, you can't, well, non-private when it's public, a lot of women just want to share their private journey and they want help and support. So I have changed it to a subscription only community, subscription only, like-minded women, learning to be more sovereign in how we do life, more sovereign in how we take care of our health. Do we need their services? From time to time. But why are we relying on something that's hurting so many of us? That's nonsense. More sovereign in how we take care of our families, more sovereign in our finances, more sovereign in where our food comes from. So it's a community of people to come in, closed, open, honest, heartfelt, kind. Every community I have stays very kind. I've never had one blow up with petty nonsense. I've never had one do that. So that's why I say we're grown-ups. Grown-ups come in here and we talk and we have a great time. Anyway, if you're interested, harriganhive.com and come join us.
Yeah, it's a very low monthly payment that you can join and I believe cancel at any time. So yeah, especially if you're in the birth space, like if you are a midwife or a doula, definitely worth joining. It's incredible. So, there was a question real quick I want to address. So, best advice for how dads, fathers can do what they can do in
Okay.
this process since there's so much about mother.
Just before that, how do you access the system care in Canada? Clients come to us because we're entirely out of system. I have a lot of privacy things in place. You know, my emails are only secure and encrypted. Anything online is secure and encrypted. Transactions are private. So there's a lot of privacy for those that are moving out of the system, because when you leave a cult, it can feel very scary. If they want medical services, it's very easy to access here. If they want blood work can be accessed privately through a naturopath that keeps the government out of it, because we are universal pay. That's why I say the government. We are third-party government paid for healthcare. They can go to a family doctor and go get blood work. They can order tests that way. If they need medical care, show up at a hospital and you get it. It's that simple. That's how it works here. But we work pretty hard to keep them out of it. Okay, best advice for dads, fathers in this process, since so much is about the mother baby. Okay, I'm not really sure how to answer that, because fathers have been removed because now this was in my father's time in particular, and it's just the same legacy. Women went into the hospitals and the fathers were told to stay out. The mothers had an epic experience. The obstetricians at the time were male, and the women bonded romantically to their obstetricians. And the obstetricians friggin' loved it, because they're there at that moment between her legs. And when she came out of her anesthesia, she looked at him and went, oh. So they loved it. They kept the men out. The men didn't come in until the 1970s, 80s. And the only reason the men were allowed back in is because male obstetricians wrote books that said it was a good idea. So we have LaBoyer and Grantley Dick Reed and Bradley, and we have these other male obstetricians that say it's a good thing for the men to be there. Why should the men be there? And Lamaze, because the men are going to keep control of their women. You know, the women can bring the men in, and the men's job was to control their woman. They were going to teach her how to breathe. It was husband coach childbirth. It was going to be, and she was to be self-sedating with her breathing, and her man was going to keep control over her. And that means that the system was still going to do whatever the fuck they wanted to do with her. But now the men were in there controlling their women. And that's why they were allowed back in. So they went through this, education process too, to control their women. And then the epidural came along, and nobody had to control the woman, because you get the epidural and she'd just lie there like a beach tuna. And the epidural took the place of women-centered care. Where are the doulas, the sisters, the mothers, the aunties? You really don't need them if she's lying there like a beach tuna. Now, if you've gone through an induction and you've got synthetic oxytocin, please take an epidural, because that's torture. An induction with Cervidil or Cytotec, an induction with synthetic oxytocin, Pitocin, is torture. It is not labor. Take the epidural. But anyway, that is the benefit. Many women are coerced into it, pushed into it, because then they're like a beach tuna. So the men's role has never really been, and once the epidural came, then he became kind of useless. He's not there to control his woman. The epidural does that. And the men have now been like kind of annoying. They're just in the way. In the home setting, when you leave this, they're everything. They're everything. This is the person she loves, provided it's a good relationship. It's the person she loves. This is the one who knows her better than anybody else. And it's beautiful, and it's in their home. And I've been at places where it becomes intense, and he needs a little break. So one fella, he changed all the hinges on the kitchen cupboards. That was brilliant, brilliant. And then, then he came back for the birth of the baby, and it was brilliant. Men can, I recommend the one book for everybody to read is Rachael Reed, brilliant woman, Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage. If he's willing to do that, which most men aren't, he will be very well positioned. Otherwise, you work with people who don't marginalize this guy. This guy's important. And you don't hire people who move him to the margins. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, because I don't really encounter those things in my world. What about midwives using castor oil? Oh boy. They're playing beat the clock. So wherever this is, there's that time limit, that all babies must be out by whatever random date was made up by some dude, 42 weeks. Every kid must be out at 42 weeks. And the rule is, no midwife can stay in the same space as a woman who's having a baby if she's more than 42 weeks. A woman can do whatever the hell she wants, but it just means a midwife isn't allowed to be there. And, here, every woman has to pass 200 tests before a midwife will agree to be at her home birth. And I think, well, she's not that important. Call the gardener. This is playing beat the clock. And from my perspective, and from the perspective of science and physiology, she's playing silly bugger. The thing that triggers labor is the baby's lungs. There is this finely tuned concert of hormones that comes together that I said is music, beautiful symphonic music between the mother and the baby. The final switch, the thing that takes the conductor's baton to commence this beautiful orchestration, is the baby's lungs. The baby's lungs secretes a protein that says, we can breathe. And that's what starts it. Anything before that bypasses all of the safety mechanisms of birth. The baby has not given the trigger. Castor oil is playing silly bugger with a finely tuned concert of hormones, bypassing the safety mechanisms, bypassing the safety mechanism of the baby's lungs, bypassing the safety mechanism of relaxin that opens the pelvis, that softens the baby, that allows their skull to mold, bypassing the safety mechanisms of having all of the right receptors in place so that when the oxytocin comes out after birth, it lands to prevent hemorrhage. So my perspective is castor oil is silly bugger, and it shouldn't be done.
So good. Guys, are you learning anything? Drop in the chat if you learned anything on this call tonight. I definitely have. Every time I listen to Billie, I learn something new. Okay, you're gonna have a fun one with the dynamic doulas. They have 5 questions. Answer whichever one you want. So have your pick there.
Oh, Sarah. Okay, I will get to the one to Sarah in just a second because we missed Hannah. I've
I
seen
keep
some.
missing Hannah. I am so
Yeah,
sorry. I tell you what,
sorry, Hannah.
I have a ton of like stuff on the screen, and so it is not on purpose at
No,
all.
I keep putting like multiple comments because something pops in my head and then I add something else. So no worries. I'm sorry for blowing up the chat too.
I no, thank you. I'm so glad you're here.
Okay, I've seen some midwives put time clocks on women if their water breaks before contractions come. They start to reach 48-hour mark and then suggest castor oil. The reason being that the longer a woman's waters are opened without the baby arriving, the greater the risk of infection. Where is that infection coming from? Those gloved fingers going up her hoo-ha. I have been with women whose waters have been broken much, much longer. Never a hint of infection because I don't stick my fingers up other women's vaginas. Until my husband died, I said, it's because I'm a happily married woman. I don't need to.
You know, that's an amazing perspective because I tried to wrap my head around that because the midwives believe, like I've seen a few from where I'm from. I've seen them, they do operate in the same belief of the lungs trigger labor, and they have at least like that aspect. But then I've seen them still, that's why I was like, is that contradicting what they're believing in? Because as soon as a mom, their water breaks earlier, then they're like, oh, well, we need to avoid a hospital transfer. So if they start to reach 48 hours, then for the risk of infection, then we need to give them castor oil so they don't have to go. Like that's their option, is they either go to the hospital and like they'll tap out, or they're afraid that they're going to tap out and then they end up going to the hospital. But I just thought, well, isn't that not really, and that got brought up when you talked about Pitocin, because I was like, well, the intensity of castor oil, I'm speaking from experience with my first kid. My midwife in the hospital did that to me with the castor oil. And I mean, it was my decision to take it at the end of the day, but still I believed her because I wasn't educated enough. And then I've seen this happen multiple times with moms too, as a doula. And yeah, I mean, I learned a lot more with my second, but still there was things that came up in my own home birth with my second, that I was like, okay, still there's some things off about this. Why are their fingers constantly coming around? Why, the same thing you said of like, at one point, I think they thought that there was shoulder dystocia. So it was like, we need to check, push our fingers out because we need to check if baby has shoulder dystocia. Like there's just different red flags that come up to me in all these different scenarios. And with the desire to be a midwife, I don't want to be following blindly down these same things that I'm trying to avoid as a doula. Like the whole point of me becoming a midwife is to be that provider that's making that change, rather than, you know what I mean? Because as a doula, I guess I could do the same kind of change, but I feel like there's less power not being the provider that they trust as much as the midwife, because I've always seen, whether it's the hospital or whether it's the midwife, as soon as the provider says something, whether I'm saying that's not true, they don't want to trust me when their provider is right there telling them. You know what I mean? Like there's that relationship, but that's still like, they still think that provider knows best no matter what.
It's the power dynamic.
Yeah. And I don't want to have that power. It's more of, I want to be able to be that support and be that provider that other people are not being. So
have a look at my course.
Okay. I already checked out your page. So
I teach the science, the real stuff. And the solution to not being induced for a, prolonged rupture of membranes is don't call the midwife. Don't tell them. You don't tell them the water broke, and you don't call them until you've got good active labor. Just don't tell them. And that'll keep their fingers out of there, and it'll keep them from being stressing and doing all the things to protect their license and get you in the hospital. It's the simplest solution because they have a belief system. You can't change people's belief system until they're ready.
So it is still about protecting their license. So it is still okay. I could see that. I could definitely see that. Thank you for opening up that perspective.
Okay, Sarah, 5 questions. My craziest birth story? I couldn't even start.
That could be a whole episode in itself.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah. I have one just from recently, but I won't talk about it until it's at least a few years old. Is Bandle's ring something to actually be feared? Well, I've never seen it. I'm sure it is a concern. I would pay attention, but I don't know because I've never seen it. So I don't know what to say about that one. I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know the physiology of it. So I would love to answer that one, but I can't. Is there any truth to a woman having a single baby after twins having more chance of hemorrhaging with subsequent pregnancies? Oh, for crying out loud, no. Oh, for the love of the Lord. No, what they're saying is, oh, good grief. What they're saying is, well, your uterus stretched and now you're all flobbity bobbity and, you're wobbly boobly. And then you have a baby and it's just not going to contract because, you have, I can't make this up. No, it's just a belief system that whatever it is, something's going to go wrong. Is
So
there
the
evidence?
context of this is that with my own twins, my doula talked to a very rogue midwife who said, do not let the midwife pull on her placenta after the baby is born at home. And her thought was that because I'd had twins first, that I don't know, I would be at higher risk. And so now I'm going into a home birth, single baby in the next couple of days, I imagine, where she had twins first. And I mean, obviously we've talked all about that, not letting, like we talked about at the conference, cows have more respect than humans for keeping hands off pulling the cord. But I'm just wondering like where that even came from, that she had told my doula that to look out for that, like this larger placenta space and now this smaller placenta on there. And then I'm thinking like scarring, or like, what were they talking about?
My guess is she once had a client who had twins, and then she had a client who had a singleton, and for whatever reason, there was a hemorrhage, and in her brain, she put 2 and 2 together, and she said it was because she had twins. Humans love association, and they create association where none exists. That'd be my guess. Okay, how are we doing here? That was number 3. Number 4. Placenta previa. Any way to know before you're bleeding down your leg? No. If you're not doing an ultrasound, no. If you're using a fetoscope and it is on the anterior wall, the front of the belly, and I don't use Dopplers, that's ultrasound, and you're using a fetoscope, you can place the placenta. The fetoscope is a specialized stethoscope that listens to babies and bellies. And when it goes on the belly, when you listen for the baby, you hear thump, 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 thump. But when you hear the placenta, you hear. So if the placenta is on the front wall and you put the fetoscope on it, but if it's way, 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 way down there, you might catch it down there. But other than that, it's when the bleeding starts. And then go to a hospital, please. So starting usually, the average time, I believe it's average, is around 36 weeks, because the cervix is beginning to, the hormones are just softening things, just, a little bit, not a lot, but they're softening things. And as things soften, the blood vessels where the placenta is attached at the cervix tear away because it's softening. And then the blood flow through the placenta falls out the vagina and down the leg. You got blood going down your leg, please go to a hospital. And that is not a sudden detach. That is not the baby suddenly coming out. It is the softening of the cervix that gives you the warning that it's coming. That is how it has historically been handled. I have heard of historical midwives who could still get a baby out with a previa. We don't have those skills. They got burned. We don't have them. I would love to have them. I don't. I wish I did. But okay, number 5. What herb should I have with me if my client decides not to call her a midwife? This is a hive question. Antihemorrhagics. There's the before the placenta antihemorrhagic and after the placenta antihemorrhagic. You should have those. I'm a big believer in those because I cannot carry synthetic oxytocin, so I carry herbs, and I use them from time to time. They're useful.
Wow. So much gold tonight. I hope this time, if you made it through the call, it took over an hour. Wow, we're at 6:13. Took over an hour of your time. Just really appreciate you guys being here, meeting you. I've DM'd several of you and just love love this community that we're building. And it's really important that women serve other women. I mean, that's how it has been historically. And I love the picture, Billie, that you show of like how it used to be. The moms, the aunts, the grandmothers, the children, they witnessed the birth, and we grew. It used to be that you grew up familiar with birth, and we've lost that. But we're bringing it back.
We've also
We're
been
bringing
told
it
that
back.
everybody died. The medical industry says that when you stayed home with your auntie and your mama, everybody died. Well, they didn't. They actually
still
didn't start
here.
dying until they went to the hospital.
Wow. So amazing. So any last comments you want to have, Billie, before we wrap it up for this evening?
Come join me in the Hive community. You can ask me stuff. I'll answer. We'll do lives. Come and have fun with us. We're a lot of fun.
Yeah. If you got a taste of her tonight, it's worth every penny to join the Hive. And I hope to see you guys over there. All right. Last comment I'll make is thank you again for being here. It means so much that we can show up and support each other. If you have a mom friend that I'm sure everyone does who has bought into the lie of the medical system that their safest option is the OB, encourage them. Encourage them. Share your story. Share what you know. And that is why we are starting the Beautiful Birth Story podcast. We already have so many lined up that are going to start sharing their birth stories. We need to get it out there. We need to get good birth stories in the ears of moms because there is so much bad out there that we need to encourage women that you can have a good birth. All right. I will see you guys on Instagram, and hopefully we'll be doing some of these again in the future. So thank you, Billie. I really appreciate you being here. And I put the link for the Hive, but if not, you can go to her Instagram, which I've tagged her in several of my stories recently. You can go find her, and it's also in her bio.